Welcome back to the Creative Boom podcast with me, your host, Katie Cowan. Up next is Lisa Congdon, an artist of many talents based in Portland, Oregon. She does everything from fine art to illustration, but is best known for her colourful graphic drawings and hand lettering. She works for clients around the world, including the Museum of Modern Art, Harvard University, Martha Stewart Living, Random House Publishing, and many more. She's also the author of 8 books, including Art Inc., The Essential Guide to Building Your Career as an Artist, and her latest book, Find Your Artistic Voice, The Essential Guide to Working Your Creative Magic. Lisa was one of 10 artists to design a bespoke poster for Creative Boom's 10th anniversary in 2019. I was eager to find out how she's doing, especially as she's had quite a challenging time lately. Here's our chat from mid-March. Hi Lisa, it's lovely to finally see you face to face and meet you and chat with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, all things considered, Katie. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I know you are going through quite a tough time at the moment, aren't you?
Well, I'm on the tail end of it. Yeah. It's been an interesting couple of months, although I feel like 2020 for everyone has been a little surreal.
Yeah, I mean, it is really weird. We had a bit of kind of trouble getting set up then, and we were trying to figure out why Zoom might be sort of a bit slow to get going. And we think it's this, the world sort of going a bit virtual because we're all being told to stay at home.
Yeah, it's been weird. And so back in December, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I have been doing a lot of kind of isolating and laying low anyway. So in some ways, life right now doesn't feel terribly different for me, only because, you know, I've been sort of convalescing, recovering from radiation treatment. And it's interesting. I was telling somebody yesterday that I normally, when I have to sort of stay inside and rest, I get FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. And I had been experiencing a lot of FOMO recently. And then in the last week, it's all but disappeared because basically, I don't mean to make light of the situation, but basically everyone is having to stay inside and lay low. Yeah. So, it's like oddly comforting for me because I've been, doing this for a couple of months now. So
sure.
Anyway.
So now you know that everybody's just sort of hunkering down. You can sort of relax.
Exactly. We had to cancel a vacation. We were supposed to go to Mexico right after. Well, actually, we're supposed to leave tomorrow. And last week we decided to cancel our trip because they were advising, to restrict travel. And I was so disappointed because I had to cancel the trip. But then I quickly realized everyone in the world was canceling their trips. Like all the things that we normally feel really bad about having to cancel, everyone is having to cancel. So it's like, there's this sort of universal humanity. Like everyone's experiencing very similar things right now. It's very weird. Like all over the world. It's one thing to have a natural disaster in one part of the world. I was just thinking about how Australia went through those wildfires recently. Yeah. And we might commiserate with them, but we don't really know what it's like because we don't live there, right? But this is a situation that's affecting everyone on every continent.
I know. And it's something as well that kind of knows no bounds. So whereas people before might have said, well, that part of the country is suffering from that kind of disease, it's not really going to reach me because it's in that sort of, area where it can't sort of really go anywhere else. Whereas this is like a virus that knows no bounds, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, wherever you live, it's there and we could all potentially get it. So
that's right.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's kind of making us all really reassess quite dramatically, really. I mean, I know that what you've been through has probably made you change your perspective a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, both in terms of, I think anytime you're sort of diagnosed with a medical condition that requires any kind of surgery or treatment or is life-threatening in any way, and mine, by the way, was not life-threatening. They caught it really early and it was something that they were able to treat. But it does sort of put into perspective your life, your vitality, your mortality, and I'm 52 years old and have lived this, already half a century with very little of that to worry about. I've been, unlike a lot of people, I've been very healthy my whole life. I've never had any kind of disease. I've had a few surgeries, mostly for sports injuries.
Yeah.
And so this is like a totally new experience for me. And also, given the pandemic in the world right now, I'm immunocompromised at the moment because of radiation treatment. And so it's sort of doubly making me, think very carefully about sort of how I enter the world and like, hygiene and all of those things that normally on a day-to-day basis we never think about.
No, we don't. And how are you coping mentally? I mean, I can imagine that you're super positive and always trying to find the silver lining.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny that you say that because, like I said, last week, about a week ago, we decided to cancel our vacation to Mexico. And, I've been spending a lot of time inside in Portland. It's very sunny today, but normally I live in Portland, Oregon, and the winters are probably very similar to Great Britain, lots of rain and gray and cold, right? And there's, this point at which you just start to lose your mind because there's no sunshine and it gets dark really early and doesn't get light out. And, we're pretty far north and you just, so we've been sort of trying to plan vacations either to California, which is a little bit south of us, or, out of the country sometime in the spring to just survive the gray. And I had been looking forward to this vacation to Mexico where we were going to go to Mexico City and then to Cozumel, which is a coastal island on the Gulf side. And I literally lost it, like just started sobbing. And I'm not much of a crier because I was so disappointed. And then within a few minutes, I just sort of was like, okay, well, how do I make the best of this situation? Because it is what it is. And I'm really good at doing that. I feel really fortunate that I sort of have that attitude in life. So
it was probably quite a build-up, wasn't it? That was probably the thing. It was probably just coming out all at once, having been strong.
Yeah, and I think exactly. It's like everybody who lives in a cold, dark, gray place is going to be disappointed when their vacation to a sunny place is canceled. But I was extra disappointed because I had been inside a lot of January and February and been really tired and just sort of like really aching to get out of here,
Yeah.
But, I was like, okay, there's nothing I can do. So what are all the things that I can do right now? And one of the things that was interesting is I was a little bit stressed out the week before because I have a show that opens in June and I had a couple of projects that I was working on and I was feeling a little anxious to try to finish as much of them as possible before I left on vacation. And then I was like, well, I don't have to worry about those deadlines anymore. I have more time to do my work. And my wife and I have started thinking about like, what are all the things we can do while we're sort of holed up at home and what projects can we work on that don't require us to leave the house? And it really forces you to be creative in new and different ways.
You should recreate Mexico in your living room and create a little beach.
I know.
And maybe get like a bright light, take a lampshade off a lamp and just, you know.
Well, really lucky this week because the sun has come out and it snowed here on Saturday, but so it's really cold over the weekend. But then just this week it's warmer and I don't know Celsius, but in Fahrenheit it's going to be like in 60 degrees or something this week. So it's let's just say it's not exactly Mexico, but all things considered, it's pretty nice for Portland in the winter and spring.
Yeah, it sounds it. I mean, we live in similar cities. I live in Manchester, where the joke is that it always rains, and I can imagine Portland has a similar reputation.
Mm-hmm. Very similar, yeah.
It makes us very resilient, I think, because we kind of do have to go through 6 months of grey And then when the sun comes out, I think we all go a little bit crazy. There's a big drinking culture here, and I genuinely believe that's to do with the weather and the fact that us Brits have to put up with such grey, and then everybody
that's
goes
also
nuts.
true here. That's also true here, and they're shutting bars down and everything right now, and I think a lot of people are like, where's my outlet? So I suspect that if I suspect if this goes on much longer, that people all over the world are going to become super angsty and not really know how to deal with their anxieties. And it could get kind of rough. Like it's really interesting to think about what could happen. I try not to go down those rabbit holes, but
yeah, I know. Well, I'm doing the same. I'm kind of like, a fan of dystopian fiction, and I've always kind of enjoyed the zombie genre and things like that. And now I just feel mega guilty for having invested in those kind of films and books, because what's happening in the world at the moment is kind of like the start of one of those stories. And just want to tell everybody to stop panicking and buying so much toilet roll. But if everybody else is doing it, you can understand why they all go into this kind of mentality, this frame of mind. What are we going to do if the food runs out type thing? So yeah, it's a bit dark at the moment, but I'm trying to stay positive.
I was just saying to somebody the other day, I feel like I'm living inside of a dystopian novel. Like, I mean, this is probably true in Great Britain too, but just like our government, even before the pandemic, is ridiculous and also in denial about what's happening. And it makes it all the more surreal, for sure.
Sure, definitely. Well, let's talk about something a bit more cheerful.
Let's go there. Yes.
Yeah. Let's not talk about the serious stuff for too long. I mean, it's important to chat about it, and it's reassuring to know I'm not alone in the way I feel about everything that's happening right now. But again, I'm like you. I'm a kind of positive person, and just looking at your art, I mean, it's wonderful that all the lovely messages that you put out, you definitely have an impact on everyone that follows you and knows of you. But you didn't actually take up art until your early 30s, did you?
No, and I was working at the time in an office. I worked for a nonprofit organization that worked in public education in San Francisco and the surrounding cities. And I took an art class with my brother. I sort of initially, I'd always been sort of, I think people would have called me a creative person, but I didn't identify as an artist. I didn't have any artistic skill per se. And I was probably known to my family and friends as being more sort of crafty. But in about 2003 or so, I was in my early 30s. My brother and I had both been through kind of breakups of long-term relationships right around the same time. And I was already living in San Francisco, and he moved there from where he was living. And he was going back to school to get a certification for like landscape design. And he had to take an elective, and he asked me if I wanted to take this painting class with him. And it was a class that was open to the public. And I said, sure. So we were both single and didn't really, have huge social lives at the time. So it was like a class that was on a Friday night or something. And so I took this painting class with my brother, and neither of us had, I don't think, ever taken a painting class before. And we had so much fun. We loved the instructor. And I got really into it. I don't think my brother picked up a paintbrush ever again after that class, but he did go on to become open his own landscape company. But
oh, brilliant.
Yeah, so he got a lot out of his program, but the painting class really impacted me in particular, and I decided that I wanted to keep painting. And the instructor of the class taught classes in his own studio in San Francisco, so I started taking classes from him, and just got really into, not painting in particular, but just the creative process. And I started drawing and painting and doing collage. And this was right around the time that the internet was sort of becoming a space for creative people to share what they were making. Not in terms of social media, that came many, many, many years later. But, there was this site, well, there still exists, Flickr, which I think some people still use.
I still use Flickr.
Yeah. And then I was like on Flickr, I like to compare it to like Instagram of the 2000s or the early 2000s. For many of us, it was the place where you could follow people and learn about people, and people could comment, and you could post your work and categorize it. And that's where I kind of started out. And I also started a blog, and I just started posting pictures of what I was making, and it looked very different than the stuff I make now.
Yeah.
Very, very different. But I was at the very beginning of my creative path, and I never even imagined at the time that I would do this professionally. It was really just an outlet and a hobby. And then the more people I met online, the more opportunity I saw in making art, potentially not even as a living, but just as a sort of side income. And I opened an Etsy shop in 2007, and that was sort of the beginning for me. So I was at the very beginning stages also of kind of developing my own style and figuring out, where I was headed artistically. But yeah, that's sort of how it started. And I was kind of old for someone starting out, but that felt novel at the time. It doesn't feel novel at all now. Yeah, I was in my early 30s, and I'm totally self-taught too, aside from a few painting classes.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. People have often come to you and said, wow, Lisa, you're doing so well. You've got all these followers, and you've got these amazing ventures, and you've written lots of books, and that kind of pushed you into teaching, didn't it? But when people come to you and say, how do I become a successful? How do I become just like you and follow in your footsteps? And it's almost impossible, I guess, to share the advice. You can definitely give them lots and lots of insight and tips, but unless you go through it yourself, I mean, from the sounds of things, you just kind of started small and then developed and tried different things out. And when that didn't work, you tried something else. And then all these platforms started to come out, so you would try those, and so on and so forth. You kind of have to be there, don't you? And you kind of figure these things out as you go along.
Yeah. I was talking to another friend the other day about that very thing, that like there's sort of, he was using this like analogy of a recipe. So people will say, in so many words, they don't necessarily use the word recipe, but they'll ask me, or they'll ask my friend who's also an illustrator, what's the recipe for success, right? Or what's the recipe? And you could give them your recipe, and they could try to follow your recipe, but there's no possible way for it to move or look exactly the same. So what comes out in the end, your cake that you bake is going to look very different than my cake, because it's kind of like finding your artistic voice. Like you can try really hard to make art that looks like somebody else's, but ultimately your DNA, your experience, your past, your story, your, interests are all going to come through in your recipe. You're going to mix things up a different way, and it's going to come out different. And I think there are basic things we can learn from each other about how to make it as a creative entrepreneur, or as an illustrator, or whatever. And I try to share that information with people, but ultimately you sort of have to go through it yourself, and you can't skip over the hard parts, right?
No, that's what everybody wants. They want to get to the end goal without having gone through the similar pain.
That's right. And you have to sort of like, your pain is going to be created by your own kind of experience or your own personality, and your own circumstances. And, I always liken it to a Shark Tank. Like you can't skip over, you can't jump over the from one side of the Shark Tank to the other. And my friend Andy Miller, he likens it to a maze. You can't go around the maze. You have to go through the maze, right? And
Yeah.
there's no way to avoid the snags. And it's actually, once you're out on the other side of the, not that you ever actually leave the maze, but when you're on the other side of the like hardest part of it, you realize that the twists and turns, or the areas where you felt lost, are actually the times when you're potentially learning the most, right? And
Yeah.
that where your voice or your business is really forming, and ultimately that's a good thing, right? Because if your experience that's unique to you is helping to form your perspective as a creative person, and it's different than anybody else's, we want that, right? We want everybody's voice to look at least slightly different.
Yeah, definitely. And you make a good point there. At the time when you're going through those tough patches, you don't probably realize all the various skills that you're picking up and all the lessons that you're learning. And you've got to be in those trenches to kind of improve. But you make lots of mistakes as well. But in Britain, failure and those kind of mistakes that we make are kind of not frowned upon, but they're not as celebrated as, say, they are in America. That's my perception anyway. It's the Americans seem to have more of a kind of healthy attitude towards failure, because you've done something, you've taken a risk and you've gone for it, and you're picking yourself back up and trying again, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that Americans are trying really hard to become more forgiving of failure. I think that there was really a reckoning, and I think in the last 10 or 20 years, to get to that place where we can sort of forgive ourselves for imperfection and actually embrace imperfection, as something that is, as you say, that we make mistakes, and mistakes can actually be helpful. I made this piece of art last year that says every mistake is progress. And I think it's an important thing for all of us, including for Americans, to remember, because, and especially for cultures like yours, where, either perfectionism is sort of the general rule, or where you just don't talk about your failures. Because oftentimes it's not that the culture is anti-failure, it's that it's anti-talking about failure, right? We just keep a stiff upper lip. And and I think that's true for like some, America's a huge country with a lot of subcultures.
We can't generalize.
And, right. And so,
all Americans celebrate failure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that might be true for some subcultures here, but probably not true for others. And that depends on culture, what culture you came from, and also, your socioeconomic status and all of that. But in general, I think and I'm really a big advocate for this. There's a real need to talk about why it's important to fail. Brené Brown, who's a social researcher and author who most people in the world know about, she wrote this book a few years ago called The Gifts of Imperfection. And I think it was a really important book for a lot of us to read. She's gone on to write many other books, but it was an important book because it was like, look, it's in our mistakes, it's in our vulnerabilities, it's in our ability to learn from those things that we become fully human, right? And I think that's so important for us to remember, because this idea that we have to get it right the first time is very paralyzing for a lot of people. It actually prevents people from trying creativity at all or expressing themselves. And if you're not creative, or if you don't have a way to express yourself emotionally or whatever, you're going to shrivel up and become very depressed or sad person.
Yeah, I think you're right. People are paralyzed by this ideal that they think they have to reach, and whether that's something that their own kind of brain's telling them, or whether they think that that's what's expected from them in society or the creative community. It's something that doesn't exist. I think that is something that's starting to be talked about and identified a bit more, especially here in the UK. People are really enjoying seeing the processes that their hero artists and designers go through to get to these amazing end projects. And I think it's resonating more with that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I struggle a lot on social media because I think that a lot of people, and I would have at one point included myself in this group, although I feel like I have a better perspective now, people look at people like me who are pretty prolific and put a lot of art out that looks very polished and finished, and just assume that from the day they picked up a paintbrush or a pen or a writing implement, that their work was as kind of, perfect, or not that my work is perfect, but you know what I'm saying, as developed.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
As it is today, right? Like from the beginning. And there's always a bigger story there, like every artist was at one time a beginner. And it's important to remember that and to talk about that and to tell those stories, because it can feel very overwhelming and defeating to be starting out and to watch all of these people make all of this amazing stuff and think, I'll never get there. I'll never get to that place where I can, I have that level of skill or whatever. And it is really true that you have to work at those things, and it takes a lot of endurance and stamina to kind of stick with it and show up every day and make art so that you can get to that place. But it's very easy to compare yourself to other people when, in fact, the people that normally the people we compare ourselves to are way further along on the path, right? Or they've just been at it for way longer. And I get frustrated with the internet because I feel like sometimes it perpetuates this idea that you can just sort of show up and become a graphic designer or an illustrator or a painter in a year, right? And start selling your work online and get hired by clients. And it's just, it happens occasionally. I met this woman here in town who was a hairstylist, and she started this Instagram feed where she was kind of sharing her lettering that she did as a hobby. And, literally a couple of years later, she makes a full-time living teaching lettering and illustration.
That's wonderful.
And I would put her into this category of the exception, right? There are these cases where people have this magical quality and everything aligns for them in a very interesting and unique way, where they try something, they're really good at it, they put it into the world, and it sort of takes off immediately. But that is such a small percentage of people, right? The vast majority of us have to work for years and years and years and years to get to that place. And I think it's really important to remember that. Otherwise, we'll become frustrated.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's about being kinder to ourselves in general. Just, this podcast, it took me a couple of years to pluck up the courage to go for it, because I think when I first started Creative Boom, it was 10 years ago. Social media was obviously just taking off, but a decade of social media and the internet and everything that's come in between, it can just make you feel like there's this huge pressure, like the whole world's looking at you and waiting to see your next step, and that can be really paralyzing. So I think it's just starting, isn't it? It's just getting started and being kind to yourself and saying to yourself, okay, you're not going to be particularly good at this initially, but you're going to get better, because the only way you're going to get better and end up doing this more and more is if you just get going.
Yeah, and I think that it's actually really good, especially once you've sort of, quote, mastered something or gotten into your flow with something, where it becomes, you want to keep doing that thing, because it's important to stay in a place where you're in the flow and you've kind of gotten really good at something, or it becomes easier or less stressful. I always recommend to people to have part of their day or week be doing something that generates a flow state, for them, because it is
Yeah.
a really important reminder that we actually can do something. But I also think it's important, conversely, to put yourself in situations where creatively, where you're not in the flow and where you're in that sort of beginner mode. Last year, I decided that I really wanted to make ceramics. And so I took the first step, and I have a very close friend of many, many years who's a pretty well-known ceramics artist, a potter. And she moved to Portland, where I live, and we agreed that she would mentor me around ceramics. And so she helped me pick out a kiln, and we got it set up in my studio, and I got the electrical all hooked up for it because it required more voltage, and got that all done. And then it came the time where I actually was going to start making stuff. And it's been such an interesting experience. I've been working at it for about a year, very slowly. And every step of the way, I feel like I'm in first grade again, because I thought, oh, okay, I'm just going to paint. I already know how to paint, so I'm going to buy some ceramics that are already bisqued, and I'm just going to paint on them, and then I'm going to fire them and sell them. And I thought, how hard can that be? Well, let me tell you, it's really hard because, the surfaces are different and the medium is different, and you have to put layers of things on things in order for things to get opaque. And I mean, there was just all of this learning involved. And then I decided to actually buy some clay and work with clay. And once again, things explode in the kiln if you don't get them just right. And you might embellish something, make something and then embellish it thinking it's going to look one way. And then it gets fired in this, kiln, and it comes out looking completely different. In fact, it looks terrible. And it's been a really great experience for me because I got to the place in my creative process where I could just whip things out really easily. And it's been really good for my sort of my character and my, and my creative self to be in this place of being a beginner again and not knowing what's going to happen. And ceramics is a particularly temperamental art form because there's baking involved. But I just am also sort of simultaneously motivated to master this. It's kind of like, this really sucks and half the time, and I'll work really hard on something that looks terrible in the end. And yet at the same time, instead of being frustrated, like, oh, screw this, I'm sort of motivated to figure it out. And so that's the wonderful thing about being out of your comfort zone, is it can often be a motivator for, for going through that learning process again, which is so good for us.
It's great for your self-esteem and your confidence as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
gives you
sometimes
that
it feels terrible, but once you do actually make something that does turn out, it feels amazing. Yeah, I've just started getting to that place where I'll open the kiln after a firing and I'm like,
brilliant.
4 out of 7 pieces look amazing. That's an accomplishment to me. I will never forget when I was in my 30s, when I was first starting my creative journey, right around the time when I was starting to draw and paint. I started assisting a wedding photographer because I was really interested in photography, and I thought maybe that was something I wanted to get into. So she was a wedding photographer, and so I would go with her and help her shoot weddings, and sometimes she would give me one of her cameras and I would get to take pictures. I learned a lot from her. That very summer that I was working with her, I went to Thailand on a trip, and actually with her, we went together, and we both brought our cameras. And at the time I didn't have a digital camera yet, but I had a film camera, and I had a Holga, which is an old sort of plastic Russian camera that takes really cool square pictures. And we traveled all around Thailand, took all these photos, get home, go to the photo development place, and I was so excited because everything was so beautiful that we saw. And I thought, these photos are going to be amazing. And I took it to the place where they develop your film, and I picked it up a week later. And literally, I cried because I spent, at the time, which felt like so much money, like $150 to get these photos developed. And I liked maybe 5.
Oh.
And I called her up on my phone and I said, I cannot believe this. I am so disappointed. And she laughed because she was experienced. And she's like, you like 5 out of, 75 photos? That's amazing. She had such a different perspective because she understood as a photographer, half of what you're doing is an experiment, right? And the fact that you even had 5 that you loved was like golden. And that really changed my perspective. Like, you don't have to like everything that you create. Not everything has to come out perfectly. But when you get sort of the handful of things that are amazing, like that is where, that's the diamond, right? Like in the rough. And so that was such an important lesson for me. And then sure enough, like a month later, I looked at the photos again and saw even more that I liked. It's just that I had this expectation that they should all be perfect. And that really, I think, hurt my perspective.
Yeah, but then kind of finding that, actually 5 out of 75 ain't bad. That stays with you, doesn't it? And then you kind of take the pressure off yourself. I mean, where do you think that comes from? These voices in our head that just kind of constantly tell us we're not good enough and that we need to improve. And sometimes that can be healthy because it pushes us and it drives us. But sometimes they can be a real hindrance, I think.
Yes, 100%. I agree with you on both of those things. I think that this drive that many of us have to be really good at something or to have things look a certain way is actually really important. But because it is sort of motivating for many of us, but on the other hand, it can be very damaging. And I think it comes for a lot of people, it comes from upbringing. I think it's in some people's genes, literally. And I was talking to an artist friend of mine who, her son is much older now, but when he was like, I think he was maybe 3 or 4, he started exhibiting that sort of perfectionist tendency. And she was like, my husband and I don't at all, we're so open with him. And he sort of naturally was very hard on himself from a very young age. So I think some of it is kind of in the genes of some people, that we're going to be a certain personality type. And I think it's also society, what we grow up hearing. So many kids don't have negative opinions of themselves or their art when they're younger, but then the older we get, the more shame we start to feel if something doesn't look like we think it should. And, I think that's part of why as adults, we don't feel confident to try something new. In my book, Find Your Artistic Voice, I tell this little story about, so there's a radio program here in the United States. You can listen to it as a podcast anywhere. It's called This American Life, and it's hosted by this guy named Ira Glass. So many of your listeners have probably heard of it, but he tells this great story on one of the episodes about the beginner gap, which, is like when you first have an idea to have, do something creatively, you have an idea in your head of what you want it to look like, right? And that's part of creativity, is having a vision. And for most of us, for adults in particular, our taste level, right, our idea of what we want the thing to look like is always way more developed than our skills. And so we say, okay, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to make this thing. And this is, true. When you're a beginner, you go to make that thing or try that thing. And what happens, it doesn't look anything like what you imagined it should, because you don't have the skills yet. And so what do most people do when they experience that? They quit because they're like, I can't, this is frustrating. It brings up all kinds of feelings of shame in me. I can't do this. Most people can't handle what it feels like to be in that beginner gap, right? In that place where things are uncomfortable and messy. And the idea is that you have to continue to show up and practice and work to get to so that your skill level meets your taste level. But most people can't sort of throw themselves into that gap, that shark tank or that maze. They don't want to go there. And I feel like this perfectionist attitude that we have in society often contributes to that, right? If you can't do it well right away, then you shouldn't even try. And I think it's dangerous.
It is dangerous. And that's just the thing, when I started this podcast, I knew it was going to be, a learning curve. I knew I wasn't going to be perfect straight away. And I've talked to so many people who've been in similar boats, and they're like, oh, I've been wanting to do a podcast for ages, but, I'm just really overwhelmed by how many great podcasts there are out there. And I'm like, yeah, but the thing is, that's how I felt as well. And so I resonate with how they feel, because you go and listen to a podcast and your silly little chimp brain goes, oh my God, I'll never be that good. But your rational brain notices that they're on episode 500 and have gone through all of the kind of mistakes, setting up audio, whether they do it through Zoom or Skype. They'll have gone through all of the sort of typical things to get to where they are to be creating and running a great podcast. And it's the same with art. It's the same with ceramics or potentially road cycling, which I'll come on to. But yeah, everybody just doesn't really appreciate that you've got to go through that process. But I think it's made worse by the fact that we're all so exposed in 2020, Instagram, Twitter, the web. Maybe sort of 20 years ago, it would be interesting to see if people were still paralyzed by the same things or at the same kind of level. I'd find that really interesting. Is it sort of the web and the fact that we feel like the world is smaller and that everybody's watching, so that we're not as creative or we don't reach our creative potential as much as we could have. I mean, it's like these young people, isn't it? They say that they don't drink because they don't want to sort of have that show up on social media.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's like I've been thinking about that a lot in terms of my own story. I started at the beginning of not at the beginning of the internet, but my journey started not on purpose, just like it just happened to start.
Yeah.
When the internet was in its, or the internet as we know it for creative people was, in its relative infancy. I mean, it's actually still in its infancy, but, and so it was not as hard for me to sort of become a known person because I just was in the right place at the right time. And I think to myself, gosh, if I was starting today with the same skills I started with 20 years ago, or, 15 years ago or whatever, would I have the same attitude toward, you know what I mean? I didn't feel this overwhelming sense of the world being small or large, or, I was like kind of one of literally a handful of people, who had a blog and who shared her work on Flickr compared to what we see now in terms of people sharing their creative work. And so I wasn't as overwhelmed as a lot of people today are. And I wonder, would I have kept going? Would I have talked myself out of it? I don't know the answer to that question. I feel very lucky that I got into it when I did before the internet got big, but I don't really know.
Have you seen social media change for you? Because you still get so much engagement and clicks and likes. Obviously, the algorithms have changed.
Yeah, it definitely has changed. I think that just the other day I went onto my old Flickr page and because I was trying to find an image. And of course, the photos are all really tiny. because we couldn't really post big images back then, right? And
No.
my work looks so funny to me now. And I was like taking photos with like horrible lighting, and I just, like it just cracks me up how much my taste level has changed or evolved over time. But
Yeah.
but I was also thinking about, I was noticing who was commenting, and some of the people who are commenting are still people that follow me to this day.
Oh.
And, this was stuff that was like, 13, 14 years ago. And I was really struck by how small everything felt and how I was just sort of freely posting pictures of things without much editing. And, my feed, my actual Instagram feed is pretty curated, and I do tell personal stories on there, but I think about them and I'm very careful about what I say because I have a large following, and I have a responsibility to be careful. I don't
Hmm.
at all, I take it very seriously.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people sort of look up to me or look to me for inspiration. And so um, it's this interesting balance between being authentic and really being myself and being honest, and also having a certain amount of privacy and being making sure that I do my research before I have an opinion about something. Um, it's sort of like all I have to think about a lot of things that when I joined Instagram in 2011, it's just random pictures of my cats, and like talking about whatever I wanted and lots of bad photos with those filters that we used to use on everything. And
Yeah.
I realized like how much, because my audience has grown, I've had to really be more careful about what I post because more people are looking at it. And I think that, some people who have large followings don't think about those things. But for me, it feels really important, both for my own sense of privacy and my own sense of, um, you know, integrity, but also um, just, I don't know.
To stay
It's an
happy
overwhelming
because
thing to think about. Yeah, exactly.
your
Somebody
mental
was saying to me
health.
yeah, that I like a friend of ours was went to the World Cup, the Women's World Cup game
Hmm.
or one of them this in France this summer.
Yeah.
And she was telling my wife that she was in this stadium that held 50,000 people, and that it occurred to her while she was sitting there that I have, let's see, if I have 350,000 followers now, that's how many times the people that were in that stadium. And that that really kind of, when she visualized it, it kind of blew her mind. And they were talking about it in the context of the fact that I had, that I was sort of like having to be really thoughtful about what I put out, right? Because so many people were listening.
Hmm.
And that was a really great visual for me too, to think like how I approach social media is very different than how I approached it when I had 700 followers, right? And even though I've always had pretty good engagement and all of that, my feed is very different. I love Instagram stories because I can post the silly things,
Yeah.
and I can post other people's work, and I can post the personal life stuff, but it goes away in 24 hours. So it's not this sort of
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't
permanent
feel like this
stamp.
massive, yeah, commitment that kind of, oh gosh, and you don't have to overthink it. You can just fire it out into the world and probably get some of that, magic that we had 10 years ago when we were just blogging and putting things on Flickr.
It's true.
Yeah, I like to do silly things. I'm learning how to play the piano at the moment on my Instagram stories, and I'm you're going to have a go at me when I say the next thing, but I'm terrible. But I don't care. That's the lovely thing about piano playing, because I've wanted to get back into it since I was a little girl, but just never had the courage. Always just thought, oh, it's too late. It's too late for me. I'm never going to be a brilliant piano player, which is ridiculous, I know. But finally, midlife crisis, turned 40, finally learning how to play the piano. And I'm just in absolute joy that I get to play Ghostbusters on the piano.
I love that, Katie. So I took piano when I was little until I was about 17. And
Right.
then when I was in college, I missed it so much that I took a piano class one semester. And I still have dreams, like literal dreams while I'm sleeping that I'm playing the piano, or sometimes they're kind of nightmares because I'm like on a stage or in a church, and
Oh,
I'm supposed to accompany
interesting.
a choir or something, and I don't, and I'm like nervous because I haven't practiced. And sometimes in the dream I pull it off, and sometimes in the dream I'm like screwing up royally. But I often think to myself, I wonder what it would be like to try to learn piano again or dive back into it. I don't have a keyboard or
Oh, you
anything. For
should get
years,
one.
I was in a relationship with somebody who was really into music and was classically trained. And we had a piano, and we actually had to sell it because we moved into this apartment where it wouldn't fit up the stairs.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. And so then we ended up getting a keyboard, like an electronic keyboard. And so for years in my 30s, late 20s, early 30s, I continued to play the piano, and she and I would, play together. And it was so much fun, but I haven't done it in probably, I don't know, 20 years or so. But I think about
Well,
it all
there
the
you
time. So
go.
your story is very inspiring.
Yeah, you've got to get yourself a keyboard. That'll keep you busy whilst you postpone the
Well, I'm
holiday to
quarantined.
Mexico. Yeah, I mean it's nice. I mean it's so liberating just to make a fool of myself. And the words of encouragement that you get back from your friends and your followers, because they're enjoying seeing you do it as well. Somebody sent me a message and said, "Look at your face. You look so proud." And I just played a really simple thing, probably like the first opening and a very basic version of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I keep
Yeah.
crying. What's wrong with me?
Yeah, because it's like it's making you feel something. And I think that's sort of like what I was talking about earlier, like this idea of putting yourself into the place of being a beginner again. It's like
Mm,
it can be this really amazing experience. And as adults, we
yeah.
just don't do that very often. And if we do it, we do it with something that feels comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And like with your ceramics, you're almost like finding your inner child again, aren't you? Because you're sort of doing something
Oh,
completely different to what you'd normally
a to-
do.
totally. In fact, the first time I kind of had a full kiln of stuff to fire, and I had worked on sculpting, like I'm making tiles right now, but for a while I was like sculpting different forms and glazing them. And I'd put some of them I have a storefront in Portland, and I put some in a case that I have there. And so customers were coming in, and this woman came in and said that she wanted to buy one for somebody really special in her life. And immediately I became paralyzed with fear. I said, "Oh, don't get this for a special person in your life." I said, "This looks like a second grader made it." And she said, "That's why it's so beautiful. Like I get to
Oh,
have this thing that's like from the beginning of your ceramics journey, because someday your work is going to be more polished and it won't look like this. Plus, she's
oh,
like,
that's
aren't you the
so
one who's always
lovely.
like embrace the wonkiness in your work? Like that's part of why I love this, because it's so oddly shapen and like it's still very you." And it made me feel really good to hear her say that. But I had like this moment of, even though I put it in the case to sell, once she picked it up and said she was going to buy it and give it as a gift, I was filled with shame because I was like, "Oh, it's not very good. Don't give it to your friend. Buy her one of these things that's more perfect," right? Like pointing to my prints or
Yeah.
one of my books. And she was like, "No, no, no, I love this." And it was hard for me to see it as anything but looking really kind of simplistic and poorly made. And but to her it was really beautiful. And so anyway,
There's
it's just such an
beauty. There's
interesting
beauty in
process. Yeah.
wonkiness. I love that.
Yeah.
I've always been a bit wonky, so does that make me beautiful?
Yes, indeed. It's what makes you different and interesting. That's right.
So, what else do you do to relax away from work? Because you used to be a competitive swimmer, right?
I did. And actually, I haven't swam in probably a year. I was swimming pretty regularly at the beginning of last year and the year before. Um, I when I moved to Portland, so I used to live in San Francisco, and when I moved to Portland, I noticed there was like not as many good swimming pools out in the city, and the few that are good are often very crowded because everybody's using them.
Yeah.
And so I got really frustrated with how crowded because swimming in a crowded pool is can be a frustrating experience. I used to be a competitive swimmer, so I'm decently fast, and so I decided I needed a different hobby, and someday I definitely want to get back into swimming, but I just keep fantasizing that there's going to be some announcement that Portland's building a new public swimming pool that's going to be huge.
Well, the next thing
But
I was going
in the
to
meantime,
announce was
in the
sorry.
meantime, I had to sort of pick a new, like athletic hobby, because moving my body has always been really important to me and kind of grounds me. And before I discovered art was really the thing that I focused on in terms of, something to learn and get better at. And so I had been a road cyclist also when I took that up when I was in my late 20s, and had got a really nice bike when I was in my late 20s, and did some very long bike rides and trained for some events and things like that. And then so I did that for a few years until I was in my kind of early 30s, and then I stopped until I was 40, and then I met my now wife, who was really into road cycling, and she got me back into it. So for the last 12 years, I've kind of got back into road cycling. And in the last 2 years in
Great.
particular, since I moved to Portland and since I joined a cycling team, I started really, really getting into writing. And it is this thing that I do that is, physically demanding for sure, but
Yeah.
also really relaxes me and uses a different part of my brain and body than art does. And I find that having this thing that uses a lot of the same kind of grit and determination and
Oh yeah. You're
self,
talking to
you
a
know,
road cyclist, so I know exactly what you get out of it. It can be
yeah, it's like,
grueling, can't it?
yeah, and so can swimming. And that was another thing I found about swimming, was that it used a lot of the same kind of, swimming and cycling use a lot of the same sort of, requirements of being disciplined and persevering through hardship that making art does. And I found, for as different as they are, they're also very similar. But it's also this way that I kind of unplug and detach. I have this group of friends that I ride with, and they know I'm an artist,
Yeah.
but they're sort of very disconnected from that part of my life. Like, they'll come to an art opening or follow me on Instagram, but it's not their world.
Yeah.
And I also have a lot of friends who are artists and very immersed in the world that I'm in. But it's so wonderful for me to also have this community that doesn't care that I'm a sort of minor internet celebrity, doesn't care that, they don't even particularly like my work. They just like to ride bikes with me. It's really awesome. And
They'd
it kind
definitely
of is
tell you
very
those
humbling
vases
too.
were rubbish.
Yeah, exactly. So I just I'm so grateful for both the active, for the like the active writing, the exercise I get, the moving of my body in a different way, how it exhausts me in this way that is really satisfying, but also the community that I get out of it, which is so different from my art community, which I also treasure, but is just very
Yeah.
different. Like, it gets me out of my head a lot. Because as being on the internet and being somebody who, you know,
Has a
is somebody who's known
presence.
on the internet, has a presence on the internet, like,
Mm.
that can become your whole world. And
Oh,
it's
it
really
can.
important to have things outside of that world that are completely separate. So,
Yeah, totally, completely agree. It's good to do that. Now, just going back to your work, you've obviously got a very distinct style, and again, that's kind of gone on a journey. You've kind of developed that over many years. Can you tell us more about it, where it sort of comes from?
yeah. So even before I ever started making art, I was really interested in art and design. And I tell the story a little bit in my book, Find Your Artistic Voice. But so when I was in my early 20s, I got into a relationship with somebody who was an artist, who was a graphic designer, and she is now an art director, and we're still friends, and still has a creative practice. But I had never really known anyone besides my mom, who's always been really creative, but was kind of not, in my view, a traditional artist, but was a creative person. I really didn't know very many artists, or art wasn't a big part of my upbringing. And, occasionally my family would go to a museum or whatever. So this was really just opening my eyes to this whole other world. And my ex, her name is Marguerite. She grew up in New York City. She, went to art school, and so I met her in San Francisco, and we started dating. And I remember walking into her apartment for the first time, and it was like filled with art books and cool posters on the wall. And I was like instantly transformed. I was like, something inside of me just like lit up. And
Yeah.
she introduced me to the work of so many artists, and we talked about art, and we went to see art, and it was such a big part of her life, and it became a big part of mine even before I started making art. Like, it was never like, oh, I need to make art myself. It was more just that I admired it. And so we ended up breaking up, after about 8 years together. And by that point, I had actually, after we broke up, is sort of when I went and took that art class with my brother, right? And started opening myself up to the fact that I could have a creative practice. So Marguerite was very interested in mid-century design, in graphic design. Obviously, she was is a graphic designer. And so part of, I think, what influenced my artwork was all of this exposure to mid-century graphic design. So that was a sort of formative part of my taste being kind of developed. We had a house filled with mid-century furniture and art and books. She used to collect books and children's books. And so instantly when I started making art, I went back to all the things that she introduced me to. And artists like Alexander Gerard and Ellsworth Kelly and Paul Rand, and those folks were huge influences for me. Mary Blair. And simultaneously, I've always really loved folk art. And so folk art, kind of separate from my relationship with Marguerite, has always been something that I've been drawn to, traditional folk art. And I think Alexander Gerard is a great example of somebody who was a mid-century designer, but was also obsessed with folk art. And you can really see the marriage of those things in his work. And so he's like one of my greatest inspirations. And so those, I would say, were like my two kind of biggest influences. And over time, I started integrating all of the things I was inspired by. And, part of how you develop your voice, not just me, anybody, is to just kind of make a lot of art. And then there's certain things like symbols and lines and ways of using your medium and colors start to emerge as the thing you are using regularly. And that happened for me over time. And I think really kind of solidified in the last 5 or 6 years, actually, for me.
It takes time. And you also like have all these beautiful messages that you integrate in some of your artworks that are just so simple, but very inspiring and,
Thank
force
you.
for good.
It's interesting how that happened. So I used to have an agent an illustration agent. And one of the things and we're still really close friends. And one of the things that she suggested to me in the early part of my journey was that I get, better at hand lettering. She wanted to get me more jobs that required hand lettering. So I decided to do this project in 2000, I think it was 2011 or 12. I did this project called 365 Days of Hand Lettering. So I hand lettered something every day for the entire year. And over the course of that year, I just got better and better at hand lettering, started developing my own style. And it's, very different than even the style I have today, because again, the more you work at something, the more it emerges and develops. But what the gift of hand lettering did for me was allowed me to really include messages in my work in a way that was kind of unique to me and visually, I thought, interesting. And so it's become a really big part of my work in the last couple of years in particular.
It really has. I love the notes to self, the 4 kind of things that you might live by. That just actually, that popped up on my kind of Instagram feed on a day when I really needed to hear that. And seeing it now, I'm just looking at it again now, 14,000 likes, 14,000 other people all agree. So I'm like, yes, I can relax. Number 1, you cannot and will not please everyone. That is a fact of life. Yes, truth.
Yeah.
By taking care of your own needs, you will sometimes disappoint or even anger other people. Do you know, that always surprises me, but, that's humanity. And number 3, how other people react to your choices is not your responsibility. Oh my goodness, that is just wisdom. And then 4, the greatest responsibility you have is to your own well-being and happiness. I mean, Lisa, can I just talk to you every single day?
Well, what's so funny is that I remember writing that out, and it literally was for myself. I was really struggling last year at a certain point with feeling like I was disappointing people. And at this particular time, and feeling I was starting to have to say no to a lot of projects in particular, or social things, because I was really busy and overwhelmed, and I really needed to have boundaries. And so I literally wrote that as a reminder to myself, because I knew it intellectually, but I was having a hard time sort of feeling it in my bones. And then I thought, okay, what if I put this out into the world? What are other people going to say? And of course, I always have naysayers who tell me that I'm a horrible, selfish person for suggesting that we should put ourselves first. But of course, the vast majority of people, and I've posted that probably now 3 or 4 times since I originally posted it. And I think the first time I posted it, it might have even gotten 20,000 likes, something crazy for me at the time. But yeah, it's a very powerful message. And I think that one that women in particular need to hear, because we're so conditioned to believe that we should say yes and we should please others. And it really can cause a lot of anxiety and resentment.
Yes, it can. And we can feel awful. But you've got all these other wonderful messages: eyes forward, heart open, just really simple little kind of mottos to live our lives by, and see the positive angle in everything we do. Show up, breathe, do your best, be kind, learn, repeat. I mean, it sounds like you've kind of got it figured out, Lisa.
Well, let's not forget that most of the things that I make art about are reminders to myself that I still have to either things I've learned or things that I continually have to remind myself of every day. And so, I have figured some things out, and I'm not, and I feel really grateful for that, because I spent a lot of time, in the earlier years of my life, sort of struggling with who I was and what I stood for. And one of the gifts of getting older, and you're about to discover this since you just turned 40. I mean, your 40s are the most amazing time. Yeah. And part of that is because you just get this perspective that is really incredible, and it's magical. You have these moments where you're like, oh my God, I don't give a shit about that anymore, or
that's exactly what I'm going through now. I'm like, oh my God, I don't care what other people think.
Yeah. And it's true. You're not just saying it, you actually believe it. It's true, then on other things, you're like, I have been blind to this my whole life. Something that you just wake up in certain ways as well.
Yeah.
And then now I've just started my 50s, and even more of it is happening. It's really kind of this incredible thing.
Well, this is lovely. I've got lots to look forward to then.
Yeah, you do. And that's why every time I have a friend who turns 40, I say, congratulations, you are entering what is going to be a magical decade for you. And it might be extremely painful, because often those realizations are so painful to make. But but once you can sort of like move past the pain of it, there's an incredible amount of freedom. So I'm just looking forward to sort of seeing where I go next, just in my 50s. Like I just feel like I'm learning so much still every day and figuring so much out. That's like, oh yeah, of course. If I had just figured that out 20 years ago, I would have saved myself so much pain and anxiety,
I know, but you wouldn't be where you are now if you'd have not gone through all those hard times. So, and
yes,
you wouldn't have learned all these amazing mottos, which is a lovely way to end our conversation. If there was one motto that you're currently living by, what would it be?
Oh gosh. I think I have so many mottos, as you've alluded to. I post them often, and in some ways they're all sort of mottos to me. I think the one that I'm really living inside of right now is this, every mistake is progress. One of the greatest strides I've made just in the last year is really forgiving myself for blunders in my life, for mistakes I've made personally in maybe hurting other people's feelings, or mistakes I've made professionally. And also just like in the work that I'm doing right now, I'm in what I'm calling a sabbatical year right now. So I'm not doing as much client work. I'm still doing a little, and I'm mostly focusing on my own personal work. And we've been talking a lot about my ceramics, and even just like, I really screwed up, a couple of weeks ago, where I put something at the wrong temperature in the kiln, and I felt like an idiot afterwards because I ruined it. And just even small stuff like that. Like, it's okay, I'm learning, and the next time I do it, it won't be a waste of clay, right? Or that I might have hurt this person's feelings 2 years ago. I need to forgive myself, and if I can apologize and make amends, maybe I should do that. But just that as long as I'm learning from this stuff that feels hard or feels like a mistake or that I'm ashamed of, I'm a better person for it. And that's sort of right now the motto that I'm living by.
Well, thanks so much for your time, Lisa. And I really hope that you get to go to Mexico soon and are feeling 100% better.
Thank you.
And thanks.
We're definitely planning on rescheduling our trip. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there. I can see it. It's on the horizon. Hopefully we'll get through this global crisis and be back to some level of normal soon. But thank you so much for giving us a shining light amongst the darkness, those grey skies.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks for having me. This was really a fun conversation.
That's it for another episode of the Creative Boom podcast with me, your host, Katie Cowan. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. Just go to creativeboom.com/podcast to find out more, and say hello on Twitter @CreativeBoom or follow me @Katie L. Cowan. You can also sign up for the Creative Boom newsletter. Just go to the footer of our website.